You ever have that one sibling who just seems to get everything handed to them on a silver platter while you're left to scrape by and figure life out on your own? Yeah, that's been my life since day one. My name's Jaden. I'm 28, and for as long as I can remember, my younger sister Paige has been the center of our family's universe. The golden child, the star, the one everyone praised, pampered, and prioritized. I learned pretty early on that if Paige wanted something, it magically appeared. If I wanted something, I needed to work for it, or forget it altogether. We're only 3 years apart, but you wouldn't think it by the way our family treated us. Paige was the miracle baby, the rainbow after the storm, as my mom liked to remind everyone, because she was born after a miscarriage. I was the accident. That's not me being dramatic either. My aunt literally said it once during Thanksgiving when she'd had too much wine, and no one at the table corrected her. They just kept eating like she'd said the weather was nice today. It's kind of funny now, in a tragic sort of way. Growing up, Paige got all the attention. Dance recitals, private singing lessons, tutors, designer clothes, summer camps in Italy. While I got public school, hand-me-downs, and the occasional good job, buddy, if I brought home straight A's. When she turned 16, she got a brand new white Audi with a giant red bow on it like something out of a commercial. I got a happy birthday text from our parents while I was at my part-time job bagging groceries. That about sums it up. I think the worst part was that Paige believed she earned all of it. She'd look me in the eye and say things like, well, maybe if you tried harder, they'd treat you better, while applying lip gloss in her bedroom with marble floors. I'll admit I was quiet back then. I wasn't the kind of kid to start fights or complain. I kept my head down, worked hard, saved every dollar I could from the jobs I juggled during high school, and tried not to let it all break me. But it left a scar, a big one. And over time, I learned to channel it into something useful. After high school, while Paige went to a private arts university in LA paid in full by our parents, I moved across the country to New York with a beat-up suitcase and a laptop that barely held a charge. I shared a tiny apartment with 3 roommates and took classes during the day while working nights and weekends doing IT support and freelance coding gigs. I don't think my parents even knew what I was studying. They just asked if I had enough to eat every now and then, like I was a stray cat they remembered existed twice a year. Thing is, I got good at what I did. Really good. I kept my head down, stayed quiet, just like I always had, but behind the scenes, I was building something. First a software tool that blew up on GitHub, then a full-stack freelance business, and finally, a startup with a buddy I met at a tech conference. We got angel funding, scaled fast, and last year, a bigger company acquired us for a number that still doesn't feel real when I see it in my bank account. I'd gone from eating cold noodles in a shoebox apartment to signing papers in glass-walled boardrooms wearing suits that cost more than my first car. But I never told my family. Not because I didn't want to. Believe me, I rehearsed that conversation in my head 100 times. But because I knew how it would go. If I told them about my success, it wouldn't be pride I'd hear in their voices. It'd be suspicion, envy, guilt-tripping. Somehow, they'd twist it into a way to lift Paige up even more. Well, your sister's struggling with her acting career. Maybe you can help her out? Or, that's nice, but your cousin still has more followers. It wasn't worth it. So I stayed quiet, even after I bought my own penthouse in Manhattan. It's got floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that makes you feel like you're in a movie. But I didn't post it online. Didn't brag. I just lived my life. That all changed last month. Our grandma turned 85 and insisted on having a big family dinner at this upscale restaurant she used to go to when she was younger. She's the only one in the family who ever treated me like I mattered, like I was more than just the other sibling. So I booked a flight, bought her a bouquet of her favorite flowers, and showed up on time, dressed nice, ready to make her smile. The moment I walked in, I felt it. The shift. The table was already full. Mom, Dad, Paige, Aunt Cheryl, Uncle Ron, Cousin Lily, talking and laughing like a scene from a Hallmark movie. Paige was in the center, as always, wearing a designer dress and acting like she owned the room. Her laugh was too loud, her makeup too perfect, her stories a little too polished. I took the only open seat at the end of the table, said hi to everyone, and handed Grandma her flowers. She lit up and hugged me so tight I thought she might cry. "Oh, Jaden," she said, "you always remember. No matter how far away you are." Everyone else kind of awkwardly chuckled. Paige rolled her eyes and said, We were just talking about my callback in LA. I might be on a Netflix show soon. She glanced at me like she was expecting applause. I just nodded and sipped my water. The dinner went on like that, Paige holding court while everyone danced around her with compliments. Dad asked about her latest modeling deal, even though she's never done a real shoot. Mom went on about how talented and driven she is, completely ignoring the fact that she hasn't paid rent in over a year and spends most of her time making TikToks. At one point, they even started comparing her to some celebrity's daughter, saying Paige was just as poised and elegant. I tried to stay quiet, just enjoy Grandma's company, but something inside me started to shift. That old feeling of being invisible, of being the afterthought. I've worked so hard to move past it, to build something real, and yet here I was again, at the kids' table in my own family. Then, out of nowhere, Paige turned to me with that smug little smirk she's perfected over the years. "So, Jaden," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "are you still doing that computer thing? You know, the freelancing or whatever." I blinked. "Yeah, still doing that." She laughed. "Wow, must be nice working in your pajamas. I'd go crazy if I didn't have auditions and events to go to. But hey, not everyone's cut out for the spotlight." A few people chuckled, like she'd made a harmless joke, but it hit me like a slap. That look in her eyes, the way she knew exactly what she was doing, poking at me in front of everyone, reminded me of every birthday she'd stolen, every compliment she'd hijacked, every time I'd been made to feel less than. And just like that, I made a decision. I was done playing small. I didn't say anything just yet, but I smiled. A real one this time. And in that moment, I knew exactly how I was going to shatter her world. I didn't strike back at Paige that night. Not yet. I let her have her moment, soaking in the smirks and little digs, playing queen of the table like she always did. But something in me had shifted, and I couldn't unfeel it. It was like something cracked open inside me, some old wound I'd learned to bandage but never heal. I kept smiling, nodding, pretending like her barbs didn't land. But deep down, I was replaying every moment, every slight, every time my parents asked how Paige was doing before even bothering to ask if I'd landed safely after a flight. After dinner, I flew back to New York and returned to my real life, the one they all pretended didn't exist. I walked barefoot across the polished marble floors of my penthouse, opened my smart fridge, and grabbed a sparkling water while the lights automatically dimmed to my preferred evening setting. I had everything I'd worked for, and yet that one dinner had left me feeling like I was 12 years old again, watching Paige unwrap a $2,000 camera just because, while I was told my sneakers would need to last another school year. The next few weeks went by fast. Work picked up. My second app had launched and was already making headlines in tech circles. I was in meetings with VCs, flying to Austin and Chicago, booking interviews. Life was happening. But then I got a text that pulled me right back into the thick of it. It was from my dad. "Hey Jaden, your sister's 25th birthday is coming up. We're doing a surprise weekend in Miami. Flights and hotel already booked. Just need you to chip in for the group gift. No, how are you? No, are you free? Just an assumption. An expectation." I stared at the message. I don't even remember being asked what I wanted for my 25th. I think I bought myself a used desk chair and a pizza that year. Paige, though, she was getting a 4-day luxury trip and a group gift. Of course she was. Out of curiosity, I asked what the group gift was. Dad replied, "We're getting her a new MacBook Pro and some accessories. She really wants to start her YouTube channel for beauty tutorials." Of course she does. I waited a few hours before responding, then typed, "I won't be able to make it, but I hope she has fun. I'll pass on the gift, too. Already sent her something separately." He left me on read. Then the group chat started blowing up. First, my aunt. "Jaden, I know you're busy, but Paige was really hoping you'd be there. This is important to her." Then my mom. "We already booked everything, honey. Non-refundable. Please don't be difficult." Finally, Paige herself chimed in. "It's not even about the money, Jay. It's about showing up for your family." But whatever. Not surprised. That one stung. I knew she wanted it too. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. What I did do, though, was something I probably should have done a long time ago. I opened my password manager, dug up the login credentials for our old shared Dropbox from years ago, back when Mom used to dump all our family pictures in one place. Most of the folders were useless. But then I found the one titled College Apps and Docs, Paige, and clicked inside. There it was. The PDF of her admission letter, along with several versions of her application essay. I read through them slowly. Then I found it. A scanned copy of the tuition invoice from her school, paid in full by my parents. Over $180,000 for a bachelor's in performing arts. All paid without a second thought. The next folder was mine. One file. A Word doc I had written myself at 17, titled Scholarship Essays Drafts. That was it. No invoices. No payments. No help. And suddenly, it all came rushing back. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table late at night, trying to finish those essays while Paige rehearsed her monologue upstairs for the 5th time that evening. I remembered the scholarship officer telling me I'd narrowly made the cut. I remembered getting my first part-time IT gig while juggling 18 credits and surviving off ramen and burnt toast because my parents just couldn't help with rent that month. I clicked out of the folder. My heart was pounding, not with anger, but with clarity. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't exaggerated. The favoritism had been real, and it had been constant. And I was done pretending otherwise. So when the weekend of Paige's Miami birthday bash rolled around, I didn't post any photos or say anything in the family chat. I just watched from afar as they all gushed about the rooftop dinners, pool parties, and boat rides. Paige posted a story with a caption that read, "Surrounded by the people who matter most. Wouldn't be here without you guys." I laughed. Then I got back to work. A month later, Grandma called me. "I saw Paige's birthday photos," she said, her voice quiet like she'd been thinking hard before calling. "I wish you'd been there." "I know," I said, "but I had a good reason." "I'm sure you did," she replied, but there was something in her tone. She trusted me. She always had. Then she added, "Your father told me you sent Paige something nice?" I paused. "I didn't." Silence. Then, "Oh, she told everyone you got her a new Cartier bracelet." I almost dropped my phone. "She said I got her what?" Grandma sighed. "I figured it didn't sound like you. But you know how she is." I clenched my jaw. Paige hadn't just tried to shame me into paying for her gift. She'd actually lied and taken credit for a gift I never sent. Probably one of the other relatives got it, and she slapped my name on the card. And that was the moment something broke. This wasn't just about old wounds anymore. This wasn't just about being overlooked, ignored, or left out. This was calculated, manipulative. Paige had taken my silence as permission to rewrite the narrative entirely, painting me as the supportive brother from afar while making herself look even more adored. So I made a plan. The next family event was Grandma's birthday dinner, her 86th this time, at the same upscale restaurant. Grandma loved traditions. I knew the whole family would be there again. And this time, I wasn't coming empty-handed. I booked my flight, set the calendar reminder, and 3 weeks before the dinner, I reached out to a real estate agent in Manhattan. We'd been in touch before. He helped me with the Penthouse. But this time, I asked if he could do me a favor. I wanted a printed copy of the deed. When the night of the dinner finally came, I dressed sharp. Navy suit, custom-tailored, leather shoes polished like glass. I took a car to the restaurant, stepped out like I belonged on the cover of GQ, and walked inside. Heads turned when I entered. Not just because of the suit, but because of the way I carried myself. Calm, confident. Not the quiet background character they were used to. Paige was already holding court at the table. I could hear her laughing before I even saw her. She wore a sparkly silver dress and a smug smile, and as I approached, she didn't miss a beat. "Well, look who finally made it," she said, arms outstretched like I was some long-lost cousin. "We were just saying how you might miss this one, too." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said smoothly, hugging Grandma and handing her a single white rose, her favorite. She smiled so wide I thought she might cry again. Dinner started like before. Small talk, family gossip, Paige dominating the conversation. But I stayed quiet until dessert arrived. Then Grandma turned to me, as she always did, and asked, "So, Jaden, what's new in your world?" I could feel every eye turn to me. And that's when I pulled the folded document from my jacket pocket, placed it gently on the table, and said, "Well, since you asked, I bought a place." Paige laughed. "Another apartment?" I smiled. "Not exactly." I unfolded the paper and slid it across the table. It was the official deed. Bold letters at the top. Ownership, Jaden Elias Carter. And beneath that, the property address in bold. A 3-bedroom penthouse on the Upper East Side. The room went silent. Dad dropped his fork. Aunt Cheryl let out a sharp breath. Paige froze. staring at the paper like it might catch fire in her hands. Then my aunt spoke. Her voice was quiet, sharp, like a blade. You bought a penthouse? I nodded. In Manhattan? Upper East Side? I said. Corner unit. Got a nice view of the park. You could hear a pin drop. Then Paige stood up so fast her chair screeched. Her voice shook. You're lying. I raised an eyebrow. Want to see the closing photos? But before I could reach for my phone, she slapped her hand on the table and yelled, Why didn't you tell us? And just like that, every mask in the room shattered. She stood there trembling, her hands balled into fists at her sides. The entire table locked in stunned silence as her voice echoed off the restaurant walls. Why didn't you tell us, Jaden? It was the first time in my life I'd seen Paige shaken. Not fake crying for sympathy shaken. Genuinely unmoored. Her eyes flitted from the document on the table to my face, like she couldn't compute how reality had flipped on her. For once, she wasn't the center of attention. For once, she didn't control the narrative. And she couldn't stand it. I didn't answer right away. I just sipped my water and looked at her, calm, unreadable. Jaden, my mother said next, her voice tight with confusion. Is this real? I nodded once. Yeah, bought it last fall. Closed in December. The silence that followed was almost suffocating. No one touched their dessert. No one blinked. I could feel the weight of 2 decades of imbalance shifting right there at that table. Paige's carefully constructed identity, the favorite, the shining star, the one who always won, was cracking. My dad tried to chuckle it off. Well, that's impressive, son. You didn't mention anything about this at Christmas. I wasn't there at Christmas, I said simply, looking him in the eye. His smirk faded. Right on cue, Paige turned to their side of the table. Are we just gonna pretend this makes sense? He was coding in his underwear 3 years ago, and now he's some real estate mogul. I couldn't help but smirk. It's called work, Paige. You should try it sometime. There were a few awkward chuckles, including one from Lily, our cousin, who quickly covered her mouth. But Paige wasn't laughing. She narrowed her eyes. So what? You were just waiting to drop this bomb at Grandma's birthday, like it's some kind of gotcha moment. I leaned forward, folding the deed and sliding it back into my jacket. No, I just didn't feel the need to explain myself until someone asked. That's all. Grandma reached over and gently touched my wrist. I'm proud of you, she said softly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Always have been, even when no one was paying attention. That was the final crack in Paige's mask. She turned beet red. Oh my God, are you kidding me? He's been a ghost for years. He didn't come to my graduation. He didn't come to Miami. He didn't even text me happy birthday. That's because, I said, still calm. You told everyone I bought you a Cartier bracelet. She froze. The air went cold. I could see it in her face. She hadn't expected that to come back around. Her mouth opened like she had a defense ready, but all that came out was a scoff and a shrug. Whatever. It was a joke. No, Grandma said sternly, and it made everyone sit straighter. It wasn't. That was a lie, Paige. You know it. Paige's face crumpled. You're all seriously gonna do this? Right now? At Grandma's dinner? She turned back to me, venom in her voice. I don't care how much money you have now. You'll always be the weird, quiet one no one remembered to pick up after school. I didn't flinch. Yeah, and while you were getting dropped off in a Benz, I was building something. You were jealous, she snapped. No, I said, finally allowing the steel to creep into my voice. I was ignored. There's a difference. And just like that, she stormed out of the restaurant. My mom stood up halfway, like she might follow her, but then slowly sank back down, stunned. No one chased after her. The rest of the night passed in awkward fragments. People ate in silence. No one brought up my penthouse again. But Grandma beamed at me like I'd just given her the best gift in the world, and honestly, that was enough. But I'd be lying if I said I felt triumphant walking out of there. Because the truth was, I was wrecked. I'd spent years burying the pain of being second best, of feeling like I had to earn my family's love, while Paige got it in unlimited supply for just existing. That dinner hadn't healed me. It had exposed just how deep the wound really went. And as I got into the car and headed back to my hotel, all I felt was hollow. I went back to my penthouse the next morning and stood in front of the massive windows, watching the skyline stretch for miles. I should have felt proud. I should have felt powerful. But all I felt was tired. The next few weeks were a blur. Calls came in, Dad once, Mom twice. Paige sent a long, dramatic email that I never responded to. Grandma texted me nearly every day just to say hi, but I pulled back from all of it. Because here's the thing no one tells you. Success doesn't fix everything. I had the money, the view, the accolades, but I didn't have peace. And for a while, I let that eat at me. I started skipping meetings, delayed launching my next project, ghosted a few investors. My assistant was patient, but even she started to nudge me with just checking in. Emails after a few missed calls. I wasn't sleeping well. I'd stare at my ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering why the one thing I thought would make me feel seen, finally being acknowledged, had only made everything more complicated. The worst part? I started to believe Paige. That little voice in my head, the one I thought I'd buried years ago, came crawling back, whispering, "They're right. You were just lucky. You're still the weird, forgettable one. They'll never love you for real." And for a while, I believed it. Until something changed. It wasn't dramatic. No big epiphany. Just a quiet afternoon in March. I was walking home from a coffee shop when it started raining. Not the usual New York drizzle, but a full-on downpour. I ducked under an awning and stood beside a little boy and his dad. Tourists, judging by the camera. The boy looked up and said, "Dad, is this where Spider-Man lives?" The dad laughed. "Not exactly, but yeah, pretty close." The kid turned and looked at me. "Do you live here?" I smiled. "Yeah, I do." His eyes lit up. "That's so cool. You must be, like, super rich or something." I chuckled. "Something like that." And the dad nodded and said, "You must have worked real hard to live here." And something about the way he said it hit me harder than any therapy session ever could. Because he was right. I did work hard. I built something out of nothing. I survived when I should have quit. I proved to myself that I wasn't what they said I was. When the rain let up, I walked the last few blocks back home and took a long shower. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. Over the next few months, I cleaned house, emotionally, physically, spiritually. I hired a new therapist, started meditating in the mornings, got back into shape, reconnected with my co-founder, and relaunched the project we'd shelved. I donated to a few scholarship programs anonymously, invested in a startup run by a first-gen college kid who reminded me of me. I stopped looking at my family's group chat altogether. But most importantly, I finally started living for myself. Not for revenge, not to prove a point, not to win some imaginary competition against Paige. I decorated my place the way I wanted. I cooked more. I hosted small dinners with friends who actually saw me. I invited Grandma to stay with me for a weekend, and she cried when I told her she could sleep in the master bedroom. And somewhere along the way, the shame lifted. The noise quieted. The voice in my head, the one that used to sound like my sister, got smaller, fainter, until it was just me again. Until I realized I didn't need my family's approval. I never did. And that's when I got the call that changed everything. It was from my dad. His voice was tight, strained. "Jaden," he said, "we need to talk. It's about Paige." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at my phone, Dad's name glowing across the top of the screen like some kind of test. I hadn't heard his voice in months. Not since Grandma's birthday dinner. Not since the moment everything finally tilted in my direction. And now here he was, telling me he needed to talk about Paige. I let the silence hang for a few seconds longer than necessary. "Is she okay?" I asked, neutral as I could manage. There was a pause, then a long, shaky breath from his end of the line. "She's going through something," he said. "We thought it might be best if we looped you in." I could hear Mom in the background, saying something I couldn't quite make out. Their voices sounded smaller somehow. Meek. Like they were stepping carefully around some delicate glass sculpture that might explode if anyone breathed too hard. "What kind of something?" I asked, still cold, still guarded. Dad hesitated again. "She's being sued." I blinked. For a second I thought I misheard him. By who? Her old roommate. She apparently. Well, there was a lot of damage to the apartment. Lease issues. Payments missed. The building's management company got involved. Her name was on the lease, so I pinched the bridge of my nose. Of course it was something like that. And she said she was waiting on money from a sponsorship that never came through. She asked us to help cover the costs, but he stopped. "It's a lot, Jaden." "How much?" "Nearly 12,000. I nearly laughed. Not because it wasn't serious, it was. But 12 grand to them was suddenly a lot. After what they dropped on Paige's school, car, luxury trips, and birthday nonsense. And what does this have to do with me? She told the landlord that you'd cover it. There it was. The Paige special, life first, pretend later. Except this time it wasn't just a white lie about a birthday bracelet. She'd put my name down as the financial fallback for her own recklessness, and told no one until the fire was already lit. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. Flat. She what? Dad sighed. We didn't know, Jaden. I swear. We thought maybe she misunderstood something you said. You know how she gets when she's nervous. I almost dropped the phone. She didn't misunderstand anything. I haven't spoken to her since that dinner. Another pause. Then Dad said, she's not doing great. She's been spiraling, I guess you could say. Drinking too much. Posting weird things online. She's barely working. I think she needs help. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Help, I repeated. And let me guess. You want me to provide it. We thought maybe you could talk to her. She listens to you. That nearly made me choke. Since when? She's always looked up to you, Jaden. And that was the moment something clicked. Because that sentence, it wasn't just a lie. It was a deflection. A final Hail Mary attempt to shift the burden back onto me, like they'd done since we were kids. And the scariest part? I think my dad actually believed it. He didn't see the pattern. He didn't want to. Because if he did, he'd have to face the truth that they'd created this. Enabled it. Rewarded it. That Paige was the way she was because no one had ever made her face a consequence in her life. And now, they wanted me to be her safety net. Again, I ended the call without another word. And then I sat in the dark for a long time. Not angry. Not hurt. Just focused. Because I realized I had something Paige had never developed. A long memory and a habit of thinking 10 steps ahead. She was impulsive. I was strategic. She craved attention. I understood leverage. And this time, I wasn't going to play defense. I was going to set the stage. The next day, I made a few calls. First, to a lawyer friend of mine, someone I'd met through an investment circle. I explained the situation in general terms and asked about liability, false representation, and how to respond to a landlord who thought I owed him money because someone else used my name. He laughed. You're in the clear, man. If you didn't sign anything and there's no written agreement, she's just blowing smoke. But I'd send a formal denial in writing just to make it airtight. Can you draft it for me? Absolutely. By the next morning, I had an official letter denying any financial responsibility, signed and sealed. I emailed it to the landlord with a copy to Paige. No response from her. But I wasn't done. Next, I reached out to a mutual acquaintance, a guy I'd met years ago in college who now worked in digital reputation management. We'd kept in touch over the years, and I knew he had a side hustle monitoring public influencer drama for PR firms. Paige Carter, I told him. She might be heading toward a meltdown. Can you keep an eye on her accounts? He didn't even need convincing. Already have a tag on her, he said. Your sister's been on the radar ever since she tried to sell discount codes for a skincare brand that doesn't exist. I blinked. What? He sent me a screenshot. Sure enough, Paige had posted an Instagram story a week earlier advertising some luxury face serum with it 20% off using code Paige20. Except the brand was fake. The website was a dead link. And multiple followers had left comments asking where their orders were. I felt the dread crawl up my spine. This was beyond just immaturity now. This was fraud. And she was about to be exposed. But I didn't share it. Not yet. Instead, I kept collecting. Screenshots. Emails. Public comments. Failed collaborations. Even a TikTok rant she posted and deleted 2 hours later, blaming toxic family members for her recent setbacks. She never named me. But she didn't have to. It was all building. The pressure. The collapse. And still, she hadn't reached out. But Mom had. She called me that Friday, voice shaking. Jaden, sweetheart. Please, she's having a breakdown. She barely leaves the apartment. I don't know what to do. She needs a lawyer, I said. Don't say that. She needs support. She needed boundaries 10 years ago. You gave her birthday trips instead. Silence. I continued, calmly. She forged my name. She used me to cover her own mess. That's not supportable, Mom. That's criminal. Her voice broke then. She's still your sister. I know, I said. And I'm finally treating her like one. Then I hung up. Later that week, I called Grandma. She'd been mostly quiet through all of this, watching from the sidelines, never picking a side, but always subtly leaning in my direction. When I told her everything, Paige lying about me covering the lawsuit, the landlord, the fake sponsorships, She didn't gasp. She didn't act shocked. She just sighed. I figured it was something like that, she said. But I hoped I was wrong. I was quiet. I'm not trying to humiliate her. I know. I just want her to face it. For once. I know. Then she said something that stuck with me. She's always been the fire, and you've always been the stone. But fire burns fast, Jaden. Stone stays. And with that, she gave me her blessing. So I began to prepare. Not a public takedown. Not a scandal. But a quiet, undeniable unraveling. I gathered my materials. I tracked timelines. I connected dots. And then, I planned one final dinner. Not for Grandma's birthday. Not for Christmas. This one was mine. And they'd all be invited. Because if my family only ever paid attention to drama, then I'd give them a front row seat to the truth they'd been ignoring for decades. And this time, no one would be able to look away. 2 weeks after I sent out the dinner invitations, every RSVP came back, yes. It was a simple message. Nothing elaborate. No fancy language or emotional guilt trip. Just dinner at my place. Saturday night. 7 p.m. Bring nothing. Just yourselves. Even Paige replied K. No emoji. No punctuation. Just that one letter. It told me everything I needed to know. She was coming, but her pride was wounded, and her curiosity was burning a hole in her. She wasn't used to not knowing what was going on, especially when it came from me. Saturday came fast. I spent the day setting everything up. The penthouse was spotless. Lighting set low and warm. A long table set for 8. Grandma, Mom, Dad, Paige, Aunt Cheryl, Uncle Ron, Cousin Lily, and me. The place looked like a page out of a design magazine. Modern, minimalist, expensive without being showy. But there was one thing that wasn't visible to anyone walking in. A slim folder placed beneath my chair. Not a manila one. A thick black leather folio, the kind you see in courtrooms and boardrooms. Inside it was everything. Printouts of Paige's fake brand deals, the lease documents she forged, screenshots of her TikToks claiming I was abusive and had abandoned the family. And most importantly, copies of texts and emails where she told people I was funding her lifestyle. It wasn't for show. I wasn't going to throw it in her face like some dramatic movie scene. It was there just in case, just to remind myself that I had the truth on my side. They arrived on time. Even Paige, who usually showed up late just to make people wait. She wore a tight black dress, too much makeup, and a face that said, "You can't touch me." She complimented the apartment without meaning it. "Nice view," she said, eyes scanning everything. "Kinda empty though." I smiled. "Helps me think." Dinner started slow. Small talk. Grandma complimented the wine. Uncle Ron tried to make jokes. Mom asked if I was seeing anyone. Paige sat back with her arms folded, bored and biting her tongue. I waited until we got to the main course. That's when I stood up, cleared my throat, and tapped my glass. "I appreciate you all coming," I said. "I've been meaning to do this for a while, but I wanted to wait until it meant something." They all looked up. Even Paige stopped scrolling through her phone. "I know things haven't always been balanced in our family," I continued, "and I've made peace with a lot of that. But recent events made it clear that peace can't exist if the truth keeps getting buried." My mom shifted. Dad gave a weak smile. Paige rolled her eyes. "Let me be clear," I said. "This isn't a confrontation. It's a closure. For me." Then I reached under my seat and pulled out the folder. I didn't open it. I just placed it on the table in front of me. Gently, calmly. This folder contains every lie that's been told about me in the past 6 months. Lies I can prove. Lies that hurt me, my work, and my reputation. Paige froze. But I'm not passing it around. I'm not reading from it. I just wanted you all to see that I'm done playing the part of the quiet, dependable scapegoat. Silence. Pin drop silence. Then Paige said, "You're so dramatic." I turned to her. "No," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "I'm precise. You've lived your life spinning stories, and you've always had the safety net of our parents catching your fall. I was the backup, the ATM, the invisible sibling who was useful when needed. But that ends tonight." She laughed, loud and bitter. "What? You think because you have a nice view and a fat bank account, you get to talk down to me?" "No," I said. "I think I get to talk truthfully to you. For the first time." She pushed her chair back. "This is pathetic." "No," Grandma said suddenly, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "You're pathetic." Every head whipped toward her. "You've hurt your brother over and over," Grandma said. standing up slowly, her voice steady. And I watched it. We all did. And we let it happen. But not anymore. My mom started to speak, but Grandma held up a hand. No, you don't get to defend this. You let her lie. You rewarded her for every tantrum. You watched Jaden succeed in silence and never once asked him how he felt. Dad's face went red. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. And you, Paige, Grandma continued, turning back. You've humiliated yourself. You've embarrassed this family. And the saddest part? You still think you're the victim. Paige was shaking now. He's just doing this to ruin me. No, I said, still calm. You did that yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and looked at my parents. Well, aren't you going to say anything? They looked at each other. And for the first time in our lives, they didn't come to her defense. Dad just said, maybe it's time we all stop pretending everything's fine. Paige's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then, slowly, she turned and walked toward the door. No goodbye, no apology, just silence. She left. No one followed. The rest of the dinner was quieter. Not cheerful, but honest. My aunt apologized. My mom cried softly. My dad thanked me for dinner with a sincerity I hadn't heard in years. And Grandma squeezed my hand before she left and whispered, "You did it the right way." In the weeks that followed, Paige's influencer profile started to crumble. A brand called her out for falsely using their name in a promo. Her follower count dropped. She posted a long video about toxic energy and family betrayal that got ratioed so hard she deleted it within a day. Then she went dark. Radio silent. Last I heard, she moved in with a friend across town. No job. No sponsors. Just quiet. And me? I slept better. I worked better. I laughed more. I didn't get revenge by destroying her. I got it by outgrowing her. By exposing the truth calmly, methodically, and letting it sit. Unignorable, undeniable, and permanent. No tantrums. No yelling. Just one final, unshakable truth. I didn't have to raise my voice. I just had to stop shrinking.